Happy Thanksgiving Eve. It's the Matt Sager podcast on Wednesday, November 21st, the night before Thanksgiving. I hope you've got your plans set. I should give you full disclosure, I do not. I'm hoping to spend the day with my family. Failing that, I'll be able to spend it with friends, loved ones, etc. And depending on your feedback, whether you think I should or whether you think I should abstain, I'll even do a podcast tomorrow, if I'm home in time and if the muse strikes me. That's right, I need a muse to do a podcast every day. This is art. Art, I tell you. So, in truth, tonight's episode is a very abbreviated one because it is the eve of Thanksgiving. Got a lot of plans in place that I need to prepare for if I've got any chance of spending time with family. And yet, I need to remark on something that, it's a catch-22. Bill Maher, who I spoke of on Monday, is a gigantic ass, and in lieu of getting any positive attention for his lousy show, and unsatisfied with the panels of said show where he gathers together all of his guests from every end of the political spectrum, be they journalists, writers, dissidents, activists, and he goes and tells them bad jokes. New rule. Wood and paper are the same thing. And they just all erupt in outrageous hilarity. Just, they can't contain themselves. And the strain on their face. Because it's hard to act like you're really amused. And yet Bill Maher puts his guests through that every week. But the truth is, he is not relevant culturally, particularly in his own niche, that of the politically aware, somewhat liberal, angry comic. Because he did that for a while. And then Jon Stewart came around, along with John Oliver, Stephen Colbert, Samantha Bee, of course, current Daily Show host Trevor Noah. Essentially an entire genre full of younger, more talented people than Bill Maher. So out of desperation, last Saturday, 5 days after Stan Lee's passing that Monday, he did this little smarmy, obnoxious, really intellectually weak and lazy and facile article about, anyone who cares about Stan Lee dying, only a country who gives a shit about that would elect Trump. Which is so ignorant because, for one thing, America is the only country in which comics are stigmatized as kid stuff. And only ignorant, out-of-touch old men like Bill Maher think of things in this way. You know, if someone came up to him and said, "Hey, Bill, it's my understanding that marijuana is the devil's potion. What do you have to say about that?" Or, "Bill, I heard rock and roll will lead your daughter to voodoo and sex with Negroes." He'd say you're a crazy old lunatic. And he'd be correct. Unfortunately, though, he doesn't have a leg to stand on because he is stigmatizing comics and celebrating the death of a human being. Now, this is a much more complicated issue. If you want to shit on comics, that's fine, but you're mocking the death of a human being. A man beloved. I'm sorry that you didn't read comics, Bill. That is not at issue for me. I wish that we had something like a difference of opinion on music, Bill. Because how would you feel if Mick Jagger died tomorrow and someone published an editorial saying, some idiots give a shit that some guy who walks around like a chicken and shakes his lips at the audience and dances like he's 20 even though he's 75 is dead. Who cares? When I was a kid, we loved Count Basie. We had our jazz and we liked it just fine. This rock and roll crap, only rock and rollers could elect a Donald Trump. How much of an imbecile would that person be, Bill? Sadly, no worse than you. That is exactly the level of discourse that you have established. And when a guy is dead and you take that opportunity to condemn him and then make this very, very false argument that you'll hear in a minute, but saying, who gives a shit that Stan Lee's dead because I don't like comics? Well, a great deal of people are very sad that Stan Lee has died. And the problem is you're conflating a couple of issues here. A human has died and you're making jokes about it and celebrating it because you don't like comics. That is a deeper issue than disrespecting comics. That is a serious personality disorder. That is, frankly, a lack of empathy that I would suggest a 72-hour stay at a mental hospital because that lack of empathy is quite startling and very jarring and disturbing. There's no other word for it. Well, there's a couple words. It's creepy. It's horrible. It's hateful. It's noxious. It's disgusting. It is Bill Maher all the way. It's been many years since I felt anything other than disdain for Bill Maher, but I did not realize that he was sort of this ghoulish monster. But he's now so intellectually weak and lazy that following up this horrific article designed to inflame and to cause further pain. This man has a family. I just don't understand. When a human being dies, you take that opportunity to make a political point that's got nothing to do with comic book readers are not Trump people. Some of them are, but the way in which you tried to make that connection is so intellectually just sloppy and slapdash and stupid. And yet you're still talking about it. And you know what? Shame on me for taking the bait. Because the truth is what Bill Maher is doing is extremely childish. childish. When you can't get attention for doing something that is positive, which Bill Maher cannot do, certainly not any better than Trevor Noah can do better every day of the week, then you act out to get attention. And I sort of am kicking myself for giving him this much attention because unless he's a real sociopath, this is all just a publicity ploy. But having said that, he continues to be intellectually lazy in this appearance he made on The Larry King Show, or as it's now called, Larry King Now. Now, Stanley's company, POW Entertainment, came out and said this was disgusting, Bill Maher's original comments. Yeah, it is disgusting at the very least. I would also call it despicable, ignorant, hateful, vile, just gross. But so he goes on Larry King to explain that no one should be mad at me. All I'm saying is that comics are bullshit. And I just happened to say it at a time when Stanley died, and I just happened to be making the point that anyone who cares that Stanley died is an idiot, and that's why Trump is president. Yeah, the intellectual laziness here, the holes in his logic, are, again, indicative of a serious personality disorder or like autism and a willful, intentional ignorance. You'll see that is really on display in this clip from Larry King Now.
Bill, I got to bring this up, and you got in a little controversy over this. When Stan Lee died, you weren't criticizing him. You were criticizing the Marvel, the comic book concept, right?
Of course.
Why did people get mad at you?
First of all, I just found out about this.
You just found out that people got mad?
Yeah. I'm so glad that I don't follow social media like that. Every stupid thing
they
that
had to
people
tell me today about it,
lose their shit about. Yes. But talk about making my point for me. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know very much about Stan Lee, and it certainly wasn't a swipe at Stan Lee. It was.
You still liked him. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, of course. Fine. I'm agnostic on Stan Lee. I don't read comic books. I didn't even read them when I was a child. What I was saying is a culture that thinks that comic books and comic book movies are profound meditations on the human condition is a dumb f***ing culture. And for people to get mad at that just proves my point.
Meanwhile, Larry King is such an antique that he's been relegated to Russian TV and all these fly-by-night shitty cable shows. But he is still a much more intellectually and emotionally well-rounded person than Bill Maher. You know, he points out, Stan was a nice guy, Bill. You would have liked him. Bill's like, oh, I'm sure I would. But I just took the occasion of his death to say that comic books are for idiots and all Americans are idiots. That's all. Nothing to do with Stan Lee. It just happened to be 5 days after his death and in response to people being sad that he died. But it's not about Stan. It's about comics, which, of course, a culture in which they're taken seriously is absurd. So I don't want to give this asshole any more airtime. I just have to say that the flaws in his reasoning are so numerous. It's such bullshit that it's difficult to fight because you don't know where to begin. You're cruel for mocking the man's death. You're an idiot for refusing to even research comics before condemning them. You're heartless because a man has died and his family is still mourning him. It's just, progressives need to progress. I understand that in 1947, comics were considered kid stuff. They were even considered evil, and therefore there was a Senate subcommittee investigation. And Frederick Wortham published Seduction of the Innocent, saying comics are coming to get your kids, lock them up. Just as they were saying rock and roll is going to kill you. It's going to make your daughter marry outside of the white race. And you know what? The world has moved on from that time, Bill. I've heard you refer to yourself as a progressive. So why are you so against progress? Why, when the world changes for the better, when art forms update themselves, and when a man grows old and sick and goes through a tragedy and passes, how do you fail to make those connections? I just don't know what's going on. I don't know if Bill Maher is legitimately a straight-up sociopath, because that is the way he comes across, or whether he's got some form of autism or Asperger's. Asperger's. But seriously, what I think this is an incredibly pathetic cry for attention. Bill Maher's doing his show week after week. John Oliver crushes him. Trevor Noah crushes him. Samantha Bee shits on him. He is irrelevant. So how do you get people to talk about you? Say something hateful. And then when you get backlash, keep the conversation going and say, oh, no, I didn't mean this. I didn't mean that. And I'm so glad that people are upset because it just proves my point that everyone's an idiot. So, Bill Maher, please go fuck yourself. Go jump in a lake. Dive off a cliff. No one cares. This has not brought you relevance, only hatred. Congratulations. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving, Bill. And I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, for real. And get in touch with me. Email matt@mattsager.com or call 646-535-4788. You can also get me on social media. Let's see, there's Twitter @Matt Sager, Instagram, Real Matt Sager, and Facebook, The Matt Sager, where I've also got a voiceover page, Matt Sager VO, and this podcast, of course, has a page, Matt Sager Podcast. And if you want more of those social media links, along with more episodes of this podcast, my voiceover reels and contact info, articles, blog posts, and much more, you can find that at mattsagervoiceover.com. And do check out the description for tonight's podcast episode. It's got links to my Patreon and my merch store. That's right, there's Matt Sager Podcast merch. So please check both of those out and have yourself a wonderful Thanksgiving.